So welcome, everybody. First item on our agenda are board announcements. Anybody have anything? Seeing none, public open time for items not on our agenda. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Come on up to the podium, Sam.
Hi, it's Stan Sparrow again here, and well, happy Earth Day for everybody next week. The whole purpose of Marine Clean Energy was to save our Earth, and I'm just wondering, what are you going to do for Earth Day next week?
Well, City Executive Director covers that in her remarks.
Yeah, because you know, it's been a big week, tax deadline, and last week I mentioned those bonds, and they just released the Bloomberg report, 100 billion of bonds in the last year. You guys can write a bond, can't you? Have it ready for the next election, and that's in 1 year. And that's just in one sector of these new yield coves that I've been mentioning a couple times. And the other part of the yield coves where they're traded on the stock market, these large arrays that are really big, 30, 40 acres, they are now $100 billion too. And when I heard that they estimated $1 trillion of new money was coming into the solar industry, holy smokes, who would have seen? That's 200 billion in 1 year. Wow, I didn't realize it was going to happen that fast. And so when I was buying some of these stocks in my past life, that they traded, you can get it on your IRA. It's a tax deduction. Get dividends up to 15%, and the stocks have all gone up 50%. So this is the business you guys are now in. So what I'm proposing to do for you is to build one of these great big arrays and have it open as an IPO for Marine Clean Energy customers only first, and then put it on to the market, because there was only so many of these large arrays built. Can I have more time? Because I wonder if you want to hear this.
No, you're going to be really concise.
Okay, really concise. Is that when people like these super billionaires putting in $15 billion into these things have bought up most of the existing solar arrays. Last year they were losing money, and now they've all been sold. Not all of them, but this is what's happening with this new yield code thing. And so looking into that, I can help you out. You guys need me to do this, because I've been working with investors and consultants and the law firms to do this. Okay, so that's what I'm offering to you. And a couple of the other things maybe are, issues I'll talk later about electricity in the drought and some of the solar arrays that I want to share with you, and talk later. Thanks.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Good evening, I'm Dale Miller. I'm president of the Golden Gate Electric Vehicle Association. GGEVA is an organization of drivers and people who want to be electric vehicle drivers. We don't represent auto manufacturers, we don't represent charging station manufacturers or charging station network companies. The biggest impediment to replacing gas cars with electric cars is not the price, but it's the lack of access to electricity where people sleep and where they work. There are now a half dozen models of electric vehicles that can be leased for less than $200 a month. Some advertised this morning for $99 a month, and some leases a few weeks ago for $80 a month with no down payment. Contrary to the statements in the MCE filings, page 4 of the PDF, these cars are available and affordable for a significant portion of the population, especially with the savings from not buying gas and the low maintenance costs. However, many drivers, especially those who live in multi-unit dwellings, do not have access to electricity for charging, and few employers provide access to charging for their employees. Additionally, rebates for the use of EVs have been shown to greatly increase EV adoption. MCE has filed protests with the CPUC asking that the current proposals to expand charging, not offer rebates to EV drivers be rejected. That's page 15 of the document. These proposals could add thousands of EV charging connections in California, including fast charging. In addition, these proposals include improving the infrastructure to provide sufficient electricity for charging. MCE's recommendations for pilot projects and submetering of EVs are counterproductive to continuing the momentum in EV adoption. Apparently, MCE has not asked EV drivers for input. EV drivers have a wealth of experience in knowing what's needed to support electric vehicles and electric vehicle adoption, and can assist in designing programs for charging. We urge the MCE Board of Directors to work to support expanded EV charging connections and not to delay this important effort. All of us benefit when gas cars are replaced with electric cars. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak? Come on up to the podium.
My name is Jan Alfrigo, and I'm from the Valley, and I'm an electric vehicle driver. I'm one of the first customers of Emergency Energy Deep Green. I hosted Charles McGlashan and Sean Marshall in my home in the pre-post Prop 16, tragedy, except we overcame it, to have them tell why this new CCA needed to be developed. And I bought into that. I encouraged all my neighbors to buy into that. 2 people in this room attended that session in my living room. And the thing that was so inspiring that both Sean and Charles said was, we need to change the world. We need to change how energy is delivered and how it is produced, and to make it a cleaner process. We need to get the pollutants out of the air. He was looking at this huge picture of sustainability. He embraced electric vehicles. Sean embraced them. I've had many conversations with her about it too in the days since. And I spent today reading a lot of the documentation, reading the filings to the CPUC submitted on behalf of this organization to oppose PG&E's, to oppose their proposal to install chargers and to expand the availability of infrastructure. Has Marine Clean Energy lost its way? Do you not understand that it's not about ratepayers, and it's not about who has a car and who doesn't? It's about this. It's about the air. Every time I drive my EV, or my husband does, or Dale does, or Dana does, we are doing something for you. We are cleaning the air instead of polluting it. Can Marine Clean Energy oppose that in any shape or form? I'm really disheartened. I've been with this organization and a supporter and a subscriber from day one. And now I feel like, I mean, I don't need a rebate. I've gotten my rebates for our cars. I don't need PG&E's rebate, and probably wouldn't qualify anyway. Do I go back to PG&E because they're doing the right thing? God forbid. Please rethink this opposition and find a way to embrace electric vehicles in a positive and forward-thinking way, and rekindle that spirit that Charles inspired us with. Because what I read in those documents was PG&E is going to revamp themselves, and they're going to look better than we are.
Can you wrap up, Jen?
So I really want to encourage you to look back to the original founding days and messages of Charles and Sean, and see whether the opposition to this particular proposal from any company, whether it's PG&E or anybody else, whether it really is what your mission says.
Thank you, Jan. Anyone else from the public like to speak? Okay, seeing none. We normally do not respond to comments in public open time, but this electric vehicle issue is important, and so I'd like to ask Jeremy if he would say a few words. Thank you.
Certainly. My name is Jeremy Wayne. I'm the analyst for MCE's regulatory team, and I have authored many of the documents that you are mentioning. And I believe that there's some additional context that needs to be understood as far as why we filed that protest, as far as why we filed our various motions in these proceedings. I think fundamental to MCE's purpose is greenhouse gas reduction, and absolutely the rapid deployment of electric vehicles and the rapid adoption of electricity as a fuel is fundamental to making our shift to a sustainable society and sustainable community. And I absolutely do not question that. Also fundamental to MCE's values is the value of customer choice. And the application proposals that the utilities have put forward would essentially allow them to command and control and own the entirety of the electric vehicle infrastructure built out to the charging stations themselves. It would not allow for customer choice as far as who their electricity is coming from, as far as what types of charging infrastructure would be deployed. It would not allow for the competitive markets for electric vehicle charging equipment to thrive. And we've actually been working very closely with many other parties. We currently have a coalition of about 9 parties that are going to meet with the commissioners to get the approach in which the commission is considering these applications to be heavily revised, with the tenets of consumer choice being at the core of how they're evaluating these applications and how they should be instructing the utilities to revise their application. As far as the low carbon fuel standard, which is another element that we filed a protest on, we are not protesting the fact that PG&E is attempting to return a credit to EV owners. We want them to return that credit to EV owners. The catch is that the low carbon fuel standard is about fuel consumption. And as proposed by PG&E, there is little to no connection at all between actual fuel consumption and the rebate values that we pass to customers. There's no difference between someone who would be using PG&E's power and someone who would be using our light green power and someone who would be using our deep green power. And the difference in the environmental benefits that would be attributable to the different types of electricity supplies that are going to fuel those transportation vehicles. So there's really been a lack of detail, a lack of thought on the PG&E's part that we are challenging them with this protest. We are not saying, we're not trying to kill the rebate program in its tracks. We are simply protesting it so that the commission will give it closer review, so that the commission will tell PG&E to revise their proposal and to make it more true to the intent of the program, to actually tie it to electricity usage and not some arbitrary value that they base upon 1% of their measurable EV usage. Again, we firmly support the use of electric vehicles, and for us to address climate change, the adoption of electric vehicles and the widespread use of electricity as a fuel is fundamental, absolutely fundamental. I've been passionate about electric vehicles for well over a decade, been wanting to build my own electric vehicle for years and years and years. I get how fundamentally important this is, and I think I speak for the agency when I say that. We get how important electric vehicles are, not just to the electricity industry, but to the environment as a whole. We simply need to make sure that the steps are done appropriately so that customer choice is maintained and preserved, and so that there are competitive solutions out there in the market. The same way we are providing competitive options to communities as far as where they source their electricity. The same needs to be done for where customers can source their electricity for their vehicles and where they are able to source the different types of chargers and charger infrastructure to connect to their vehicles.
Great, thank you, Chairman. I think the board will have more of an opportunity to discuss this matter when we get to the regulatory part of our agenda. I also wanted people to be aware that there's a very short handout on the table here that outlines some of the MCE's concerns about the IOU proposals for EV infrastructure changes. So that's available for anyone who may want to pick up a copy. Okay, so let's move on now to a report from our Chief Executive Officer, Dawn.
Great. So I wanted to start off by welcoming our new Corte Madera alternate board member, Bob Ravasio, who's over here. Welcome, Bob. We really appreciate you sitting in for Sloan Bailey, Director Bailey, this evening.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Next, I wanted to make sure that everyone's aware we'll be hosting an anniversary celebration on May 7th. It's our 5th year anniversary of serving customers. And it's a nice opportunity to welcome folks to our new home up at 1125 Tamalpais Ave. We hope folks can make it. It's a morning event. And I'm sorry we couldn't be more flexible with the date. It happens to be our anniversary, so we can't change it to a different day, but we hope many of you can make it. One of the main focuses of the event is going to be highlighting some of the new local development projects that are getting built because of MCE, some of our feed-in tariff projects, the MCE Solar 1 project, the very large 10.5 megawatt project, and we will even be doing a field trip with a bus or two to take folks, including the press, up to the Cooley Quarry Brownfield project, where we're building solar for our local soul program that should be online by July. So it should be a really exciting event. It'll go from around 10 a.m. to around 1 p.m. probably, if you include the tour. Everyone doesn't have to go on the tour, but it should be fun. And folks are encouraged to attend, and let us know if you will be attending so that we can introduce you and include you in the program. Next, I wanted to let folks know that MCE has received 2 awards since our last board meeting. First of all, we received the Green Business of the Year award from the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce. It's a very big honor. We were in a selective group of nominees, including the Marin County Fair, the City of San Rafael, Agricultural Institute of Marin, and many more. And we were honored at a State of the City dinner on March 19th. And then the second award I wanted folks to be aware of is the Actera 2015 Business Environment Award. This was, we actually we went through a lot to go through the evaluation process with this organization, and we're really pleased that we were selected as the awardee here. We were selected in the category of environmental innovation for our community choice aggregation program. And we'll be honored at Actera's 25th anniversary Business Environmental Awards reception in Mountain View on May 28th. Next, I wanted to let folks know that we have fully moved into the new location at 1125 Tamalpais Avenue, formerly known as 705th Avenue. We were successful in changing the address so that the address matches the main entrance on Tamalpais Avenue. The 705th Street address was misleading because it led to a parking lot with no building nearby. So we're pleased that we have an accurate address now, and we welcome folks to drop by. It's of course open to the public, and we're already hosting our committee meetings and our public meetings there. We're hoping to host our next board meeting there, but that depends on whether our boardroom furniture has arrived by that time. It got caught up in some of the port union issues and is stuck on a trailer somewhere, we've been told. But we're hopeful that it will arrive in time for our next board meeting. We can host the next board meeting at that new location. Next, I wanted to let folks know what's happening with PACE financing. I think that many of you may have been approached by one or possibly several PACE financing program providers in the last couple of months. Becky Menton from our team, our efficiency director, as well as Dana Armanino from the County of Marin, who's in the audience with us today, have been working together to develop some protocols to address the many inquiries that we're getting. I think it's worth noting that our region is very attractive for PACE programs, and as a result, we're getting a lot of inquiries. And so Becky and Dana have been working to create some protocols that will help with questions that property owners may have if they're interested in utilizing the PACE program for financing improvements on their property. I should note that we really encourage PACE programs in our jurisdiction, but we want to make sure that there's a set of best practices and guidelines that providers adhere to so that we don't get any potentially bad operators providing service in our community. And to that end, Dana, taking the lead, I know with Becky supporting, has created a participation agreement, a draft participation agreement that was included in your packet that we'll be asking providers to sign before they provide service in our community. And it's based on an agreement that most providers have already signed in Sonoma County, so we don't foresee it to be a barrier. That's the community where we've seen the most activity regarding PACE. So that's kind of an overview. There's more information included in your packet. Dana's here to answer questions. And the last thing I'll say is that the programs that are currently under consideration by the county to get inquiries from these programs include HERO, Fig Tree Financing, Y-Green, and Alliance Energy. So let us know if you would like more information beyond what you've received. And if anyone has questions, Dana's here to respond.
And Dana, thanks for being here tonight. I'm going to give you an opportunity if there's anything you want to add to that, but it looks as if you might have a question here. Yeah.
Yeah, Fairfax adopted, in my recollection, we did the CalFirst, and we designated MCE to be our liaison. And recently I was approached by HERO, and I figured we have one, how many can we deal with? But at that time, we did use a model agreement that I believe we got from Becky through you. Is you didn't mention CalFirst as one of the programs. I thought that was the main one right now.
Right, I can answer that question. CalFirst is one of several programs that operate PACE programs. CalFirst, HERO, the ones that Dawn mentioned. We happened at the county, and then most of our cities happened to adopt CalFirst first.
Okay.
They just happen to be first through the gate. We now, because PACE financing is getting more, everyone's getting more comfortable with it, we feel that it's time to open that market up, allow homeowners to have a choice in which provider they work with. What we want to do is make sure there is those best management practices. CalFirst is also going to sign the participation agreement, so they also adhere to those best management practices. But what we'll do going forward for these new programs that we're reviewing is once these new participants also sign that agreement, we'll bring a board packet to our board of supervisors that include resolutions for each one. You have to authorize each program individually to allow them to operate. We've already done that for CalFirst. We're going forward going to do it for these additional programs once they sign that participation agreement. And what we're going to do is get everything set up in a sample packet that we'll eventually take to our board and we'll share with all of the cities. So that it's a template, pretty, turnkey approach for you all.
So would we need to amend the agreement we already did for CalFirst?
It wouldn't be an amendment to the agreement. You've made an agreement, pass a resolution allowing them to operate, and you'll now have to pass 4 more if you want to allow the next 4 to operate. They each have their own resolution.
No, I understand that.
Right.
But I just wondered if there was some problem. And as far as FHA or Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, there's still no...
There has been no movement on their part to give blessing to PACE programs, but we feel with the creation of the loan loss reserve program by the governor and the state, each of the programs through our participation agreement either have to agree to participate in that program or have a comparable loan loss reserve program that would make any lender whole for the PACE portion of the assessments due, that the risk from FHFA has been lowered substantially.
Okay, so I think we adopted this about, I'm sorry to take so much time, I'll just make it quick, and I can follow up with you offline. It's about 9 months ago at my request, we did that, but I don't think we've had any takers. I think Becky would have told me, but I guess maybe one of the things you could provide when you provide information is how the governor's program is really helping, because as far as I know, nobody's taken us up on it, and we sent a letter to Fannie Mae or to the administration regarding Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's sort of reluctance to change.
I don't think the FHFA issue has cooled the market for California First. They've actually completed, it's in the comparison matrix, I believe 35 assessments have been completed. We don't have the breakdown about which jurisdiction those have been completed in. We expect to get those by the end of this month. So we can get back, we'll be getting back to each of the cities with updated information on that. But we feel by opening the market, California First, the interest rates are a little bit high compared to like a home equity loan, so it's not as attractive. But we feel by opening the market to other PACE providers with other interest rates, and again, that's in the packet, it might stimulate competition and interest from homeowners who might find that HERO fits their purposes better than California First or Y-Green or Fig Tree. We want to have that competition available.
Okay, thanks.
So Dana, do you have an expectation of when you'll bring the materials for these other PACE providers to our board of supervisors?
The participation agreement that's in your packet is now being reviewed by each of the program providers. We're receiving feedback, so we'll be doing some tweaks. We'll take it to county council for final review and MCE's council as well. We anticipate that process, we hope to bring the packet to the board of supervisors in probably in June.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board or from the public for Dana on the PACE program? Saying that, thank you. Thanks for your work on this. Dawn, do you have something?
I have one last item. I just wanted to make sure folks were aware of some loans that are available for energy efficiency. Actually, Becky wanted me to make sure you are aware of some loans that are available for energy efficiency financing. There are 1% loans available for communities, well, for organizations, including cities, counties, special districts, public hospitals, California state agencies, and then there are 0% loans available for school districts, charter schools, offices of education, and college districts. And so I just want to make sure folks were aware of the availability of these funds. If you know of projects in your jurisdiction that you think might be a good fit with this, you can follow up with Becky. These funds are through Prop 39, which you may be familiar with. At least the 0% interest rate loans are through Prop 39. So in order to be eligible for those, you need to be designated as a Prop 39 designee, and they have a list of folks that are entitled to be part of that program. But this is a great opportunity to get some energy efficiency upgrades into your public facilities if you haven't already. Another great resource for that is Dana Armanino and her program. If you're in Marin and you're a public district or a public entity, she can work with you and probably has a great database already of what's already been done to your buildings and what could be done next. So if you have questions on that.
Is that information about these loan opportunities being sent out to the city and town managers?
I believe it has been, but I'll confirm that.
Okay.
And if any of you are interested in learning more, it's in your board packet under the EXO report. There are links provided for how to sign up for these loans.
Super, great, thank you. Anything else?
The very last thing is I want to turn it over to Jamie to talk about Earth Day.
Sure. So we are celebrating Earth Day this year by attending several different events. This weekend there's an event in El Cerrito on the 18th that we'll be attending. We will be at Sir Francis Drake High School, their Earth Day event on the 22nd, next week, which is Earth Day. And the following weekend we'll be at Napa County's Earth Day Festival, which is on April 25th. We're also inviting our community members to take action this year on Earth Day to celebrate Earth Day by choosing deep green. So we're going to be running half-page ads saying happy birthday, and here are some great action items that you can take if you want to amp up your Earth Day. We'll be running half-page ads in the Marin IJ, the Pacific Sun, the Contra Costa Times, which covers all of our East Bay communities, the Venetia Herald, and also the Napa Valley Register. And we'll also be sending out an e-newsletter as well as doing social media promotions.
Super, great, thank you. All right. Okay, so that's it, Dawn, right?
That's it. Sorry for the longer part.
No, it's good. Okay, so next on our agenda is our consent calendar. We have 4 items. Meeting minutes from March 5th, a list of approved contracts, MCE staff position adjustment, and a second addendum to a first agreement with North Bay Office Furniture. Are there any items any board member or member of the public would like to comment on? Yes.
With respect to the minutes, I've noticed that members of the public are identified by name.
Mm-hmm.
Staff is identified by name, but board members now aren't. We're referred to as board member says, board member questions, board member. So we're not an amorphous blob.
Should we become
And
homogeneous?
I think we should be specified as to who the comment
I think it
maker
would
is,
be
and my
helpful.
request is that we adjust it.
Thank you very much. All right, that can be fulfilled by staff, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. Thank you for catching that. We have shifted to a new method of preparing minutes, which is working very well, but I had not noticed that nuance. So thank you for pointing that out. We can certainly change that.
Super. Okay. Anything else? Yes, please.
Yeah, regarding the staff position adjustment, I was just wondering, I wasn't sure, On the contracts manager, tier 2, is that level right below the director of power resources?
No,
Or
that
is there
is,
several levels of each?
that is the Director of Power Resources.
Oh, okay, well then I probably misunderstood this. Okay, so the power supply contracts manager tier is now going to be named the director of power resources.
I apologize, I may have misunderstood your question. The item that is on the agenda this evening is an adjustment for the Director of Power Resources.
Yeah, I understand.
But last month, we did take up a different change, which was an adjustment, creating a second tier for the contracts manager.
So my question is the manager below the director of power resources? Because I thought it
Yes.
was kind of a big jump from 97,000 for the manager top step to 162 to the director. I just thought that was a big jump. And I'm sure there's a lot of good reasons why. I know you said you did a market study. Does the market study compare to PG&E equivalent type positions? Is that how
No,
that works?
we actually look at public agencies for comparisons, for compensation studies, because we're a public agency. So we don't look at private entities like PG&E. If we did, the comps would come in quite a bit higher, actually. But we did look at places like Sonoma Clean Power, for example. They tend to have very competitive staff compensation ranges. So that's become a new element in our comp studies. We also look at places like SMUD, Silicon Valley, Alameda Power Authority. There are a number of municipal utilities in the state that provide good comps. And then we also look at water districts, which can be useful to a point. But the most useful comps are municipal entities that provide power supply to customers.
Okay, thanks.
Sam,
Can I add on
question?
for the, for the Earth Day coming up here, one of the things that's really hot in the
Yeah,
newspaper,
actually, we moved off of that topic, and we're just on consent calendar now.
consent calendar. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, after.
Yeah, talk to Jamie afterwards about the birthday.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention the drought. That's a pretty big issue now.
It is a big issue.
And I wanted to add into that.
Okay, maybe we'll find a time for you later on the calendar. All right, so any other questions from the board? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Move adoption of the consent calendar.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Any abstention? Any opposition? That's approved. Okay. Next is agenda item 5, which is our monthly budget report.
Okay, that'll be mine.
John?
Okay, so we have actual financial results now through February, which is 11 months into the fiscal year that just ended on March 31st. So the trends are the revenue and expenses both are coming in a little bit under budget. The net income, or consider it an increase in available funds, is right about at budget, because both the revenue and the expenses are a little bit down. We expect by the end of the fiscal year, just took a look at the retail sales that were recorded for the last month of the fiscal year, and those look strong. So we'll probably be right back at about budget in terms of revenue and power supply expenses. So things are looking pretty good as projected.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the public on the budget? All right, seeing none, this is a report, so we don't need to take action on this. Okay, so John, I'm assuming you're going to handle item 6, which is concerns the repayment of loans with River City Bank.
Yeah, I believe that's actually Jennifer.
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, Jennifer, all right.
Come up to the podium.
Yeah, come on.
Yes.
So in your staff reports, you can see that we are proposing a repayment of about $2.1 million of 2 term loans from River City Bank. A little background on those. Those started as some working capital facilities during launch, and they were 12 months facilities. They were short-term facilities, so when they became due, they were rolled into, in one case, a 5-year term loan, and another case, just short of 5 years. And at the time, MCE did not have the financial flexibility to pay those off, but the rates on them are quite high. They are 5.25 and 4.5 respectively. And there is a they both carry a prepayment penalty. So what we are proposing is that now that we have sufficient amounts in our operating funds and our savings, that we pay those off and collect basically a interest savings of about $84,000. That includes a prepayment penalty of $26,000. So the total savings is about $110,000. Currently, the funds that we have on hand to pay those off are not earning interest. And Greg asked a great question ahead of the meeting, where he's like, what's the rate of return on those funds? The rate of return is no interest because it's in our operating account, so it's kind of like a checking account. And so we would propose to pay those off tomorrow, actually, so that we avoid another payment and capture that interest savings. And we were asking that the board approve that action.
Questions from the board? Yes, please.
The interest rates, were they so high because the organization was just starting up, and we didn't have a lot of credit history? I wasn't here then, but I would be more than happy to loan at these rates to the organization and have a prepayment penalty. I mean, they're very high.
Yeah, I can speak to that. First of all, when these loans were negotiated, we had a little bit of a different economic environment. But in addition to that, yes, we were very young, and we had very, we had no assets and a lot of liabilities. I think that contributed to the offering they provided to us.
And just another question. Do our funds at all run through the county treasurer and utilize their investment portfolio at all? And do we have access to any money through the county treasurer?
No, there is a completely separate accounting. We're not affiliated with the county treasurer or any of our member jurisdictions. As a JPA, we have separate debts and liabilities from all of our member agencies.
But have we looked into that? In Napa County, we allow other agencies to invest through our investments, and even the fact that we're earning zero on a checking account balance, we roll our funds every night, and so we're collecting interest on a daily basis. I just wondered why we would not work through the county treasurer and take advantage of some of those.
Yeah, it's great that you're bringing that up. We're actually going to have a discussion at our next executive committee meeting to talk a little bit about reserves and what our needs are and what we may be able to do to really optimize any cash reserves that we have on hand, and really hone in on what those are needed for. So we're going to be starting to discuss that in early May, and I think that's a great suggestion that we can add to the discussion.
I think it's certainly something to look at. Do you think it would be fair to say, John, since none of us currently on the board were here at the creation, that one of the issues when Marin Energy Authority was formed was being able to really insulate the participants in the JPA, the cities and towns, from liability. And so I'm assuming that was an important driver in keeping these kinds of fund balances separate from any other entity. But now that we're in a very different financial situation and are up and running, and it's the last 5 years have been a pretty fantastic trajectory, I think the timing is probably very good to revisit whether there's some other alternative.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Did you want to say something? Okay. Any other questions on our budget issues? Anyone from our public want to comment on the budget? Okay. So this one.
I'll move on.
I'm sorry, this is a repayment of both loans. I misspoke. We do need to move this one. And we got a motion.
I'll move authorization.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? All right. Go forth tomorrow and get rid of those loans.
Consider it done.
Okay, super. All right, next is an update on our feed and tear program.
All right.
Kirby.
Let's see here. Do we have that slide deck on the projector?
All right. Okay, so for those of you sitting on the technical committee, this will look quite familiar. And if you have the clicker by any chance. Okay, no problem.
He'll operate it from the laptop.
Perfect. So we can just go ahead and advance this to the next one already. And so what we're talking about tonight and the related action that we'll be asking for you to consider making is all related to an annual review of our feed-in tariff program. You can see here on this slide that from time to time, we'll take a look at this particular program, which really is intended to promote the development of smaller scale, locally situated renewable energy projects. So these are projects that are 1 megawatt or smaller. They all use fuel sources that are eligible under the California Renewables Portfolio Standard Program. So these are fuel sources like solar and wind, so on and so forth. And the idea through this program is to offer a standard contract. So this is not a negotiated contract, a standard contract with prices that are intended to reflect the kind of above market costs of developing these projects within MCE service territory. And so we go through this exercise roughly once a year and try to take a look at how it is that our program is structured and priced and what the participatory cap may be, as well as the power purchase agreement that's used to contract for these various facilities, and make sure that it's really in line with the market and other competitive options that are available to our customers, namely PG&E's feed-in tariff program, which is called the Renewable Market Adjusting Tariff, or REMAT. Other considerations are items like legislation or regulations or other concerns that might influence changes that we might want to consider making to the program. And once those items of interest are identified at the staff level, we typically take those to the technical committee where those are discussed. And we ask for the technical committee to make a recommendation with regard to the changes that we're considering making. And then we bring those changes to the board in a meeting like this. And so if we could go ahead and fantastic. So as I already mentioned, the feed-in tariff program is really kind of fundamental to achieving the overall goals and objectives of this agency. Again, this is all for the benefit of locally situated, smaller scale renewable generating projects. Currently, we have one project that's actually delivering electric energy to our customers under the feed-in tariff program. That is the near 1 megawatt photovoltaic solar project located at the San Rafael Airport. And then we have another almost 5.7 megawatts under contract or in our development queue. And that is 5.7 megawatts total of a overall 10 megawatt participatory cap. So we're making some really nice progress. And I think at the 5-year anniversary celebration that Don referenced, you'll get to see one of the sites where one of these feed-in tariff projects will soon be developed. And so that's kind of where we are currently. And I think it's an apt time to consider changes to the feed-in tariff program, particularly when we're undergoing this expansion, as we currently are. And over the course of 2015, in case you're not already aware, our retail sales will be growing by about 50%, which is considerable growth. And in consideration of that growth and the new communities in which MCE will begin operating, we thought it was appropriate to consider looking at this particular program to create opportunities within those new communities. So if we could advance that. Perfect. So the three areas that were really key focal points in this particular review were the overall participatory cap, pricing, and how it is that the current pricing that we offer under our feed-in tariff program aligns with current market trends, and also the pricing options that are available under PG&E's feed-in tariff program. And then also a project buyout option, which we've typically included in our more recent power purchase agreements, particularly with larger scale photovoltaic solar projects. We also looked at a couple of items on a very preliminary basis and then deferred further evaluation of these items until another annual review, and those items included evaluation of energy storage projects and how those might fit into the feed-in tariff at a later date, and then also whether or not we want to incorporate certain pricing incentives for certain types of development sites, you know, on disturbed lands, use of labor, ease of interconnection, things like that. So these are things that are really kind of in the hopper for discussion at a later date. So with regard to the participatory cap, I mentioned it's currently set at 10 megawatts. We have about 5.7 megawatts of that 10 that's been committed, either through contract or through inclusion in our development queue. And so I don't want to say we're running out of capacity, but in light of our expansion that's going to occur in 2015, we thought it'd be a good idea to really consider looking at growing this cap to allow for participation within these new member communities. PV solar in particular, fall offs in prices with regard to wholesale photovoltaic solar projects really have created some nice opportunities locally, and we're starting to see a real increase in interest in developing those types of projects within MCE service territory. So that growth, coupled with some trends in that particular space, really make it seem like this is a good thing to consider, increasing the cap at this point in time. So if we look at kind of staging that increase in the participatory cap in line with our expected growth during the 2015 calendar year, that 50% growth, we'd be looking at a participatory cap increase up to 15 megawatts. This would result in an overall potential financial impact just under $1 million a year. So if we look at the expected annual electric energy output from these additional megawatts that would be included under the feed-in tariff program, and the cost that we'd be paying for that energy, we'd be looking at about $900,000 of additional costs a year. But that would be really phased in over a multi-year period, because as you're likely aware, development doesn't really occur overnight. And so it's highly likely that this would be staged very incrementally over a multi-year development period. And so that's the expected financial impact, and increasing this cap would do, I think, very well to ensure the ongoing access to feed-in tariff program development opportunities. And based on our assessment of the administrative impacts, it really doesn't seem like there'd be a major stress on staff as a result of this change. So that's touching on the participatory cap and what an increase there might look like. We could go to the next one. And in terms of pricing, we've kind of evolved pricing a bit over time. When we originally launched the feed-in tariff program, it was a very small program, which was really kind of in line with our customer base when MCE first launched about 5 years ago. And we had a 2 megawatt participatory cap at that time, and the pricing that we offered under our feed-in tariff program was tied to the prices we were paying through our Shell Energy North America power purchase agreement. And since then, the market has evolved substantially. And that consideration tied to some recent trends in pricing for PG&E's feed-in tariff program have really led us to reevaluate how it is that we're looking at our feed-in tariff pricing scheme. So this is where we're at right now. You can see that these conditions, the pricing conditions in the leftmost column, are all tied to 2 megawatt steps. So as participation goes up in 2 megawatt increments, the price kind of ratchets down. And this was intended originally to capture expected efficiencies that would be gained in the renewable energy space over time. And we think we've actually kind of realized those, so it's been appropriate to have this trajectory. And where we're at right now is in condition 3, certainly above market, providing some really nice incentives for local developers. And if we could go to the next slide. If we were to consider increasing the cap from 10 megawatts to 15 megawatts, we'd certainly need to accommodate the additional capacity that would be brought in under the feed-in tariff program. But we also want to take a closer look at PG&E's feed-in tariff pricing scheme to make sure that we're not too far out of whack there. We certainly want to offer some competitive advantages to our customers, but we don't want to be so far out of market that we're kind of giving money away in this regard. So we took a closer look, and you can see here how it is that the proposed pricing changes to our feed-in tariff program are spliced in with the existing feed-in tariff pricing schedule. And so all of the kind of black text in the that's kind of existing prices. And then the red text beneath it represents some of the changes that we've incorporated to better align our program with current market conditions, and then also provide some incremental incentives relative to other options that may be available to these project developers. So that's kind of what this looks like. Transition over time, leading to kind of a base price of $90 a megawatt hour once we were fully subscribed, which shouldn't be for quite some time.
So Kirby, could you talk a little bit more about the changes that are being proposed for condition 5? Because if the existing condition 5 is 90, this is I'm looking at the base. So
Yeah.
the proposal is to move from 90 to 95, and then on the intermittent from 85 to 90. So can you just talk a little bit more? Is there particular reasoning
There
for
is.
why changing the existing condition was a good idea?
Thank you for lobbing that one up
You're
there for
welcome.
me. I appreciate it. So the $89.23 base price for PG&E's feed-in tariff program is really kind of a key bogey for MCE when we're looking at our pricing scheme. And I think it's noteworthy here, particularly the top item. PG&E's feed-in tariff program is essentially, they have these regressive pricing steps that they work through as participation in their feed-in tariff program increases. And to date, the bulk of the participation in PG&E's feed-in tariff program has been focused on photovoltaic solar projects. And so much like our program, PG&E also has this three-pronged pricing approach where they have a pricing scheme related to peak delivery project. These would be photovoltaic solar projects primarily. They have a base pricing scheme, which is going to be your biogas, landfill gas projects. And then they have kind of an off-peak or as-available pricing scheme. And this is really going to be more focused on wind development opportunities. And so you can see here in this top point that the base price that PG&E originally offered of $89.23 a megawatt hour has already fallen off to $57.23 a megawatt hour based on the level of participation they've seen. And this price is time of delivery adjusted, which means that the base price of $57 roughly equates for, say, a PV solar project to about $75 a megawatt hour when you consider that there are pricing adjustments, increases that are awarded to these projects when they deliver during peak times of day. So this is a price that is adjusted. So the price that we're kind of competing with there for PV solar is roughly $75, but for the other two buckets, if you will, of prices and projects, the base price and the intermittent price, PG&E has really not received all that great of participation, so the price is still at $89.23. So we want to make sure that we have the appropriate incentives in place to make this more interesting to prospective developers. And so that's why we have those floors established, and we've kind of ratcheted up in certain instances that bottom price to make sure that we do offer a competitive alternative. And I do think it's noteworthy, in case you're not aware, that for a base load project that isn't really expected to deliver power on a round-the-clock basis, even though the time of delivery adjustments will play in, on average, those time of delivery adjustments, if the project delivers round the clock, they're intended to net out to the base price. So, as you could reasonably expect, during peak times of day, the multipliers are higher. During the middle of the night, they're lower. But if you deliver the same quantity in all hours of the day, you net out to the base price. And so that's kind of what we're competing against in that middle column there for the base resources, and then for the intermittent resources, which typically deliver a disproportionate share of their power in the nighttime or off-peak hours, you would expect that price to be adjusted downward. So I think in both instances, we're still having, we still have a very competitive offering with this pricing schedule adjustment.
Thank you.
All right, so the last item here, I think we've pretty much already touched on this. We've got, an ongoing reduction that we're observing in the renewable energy space with regard to pricing, and so we wanted to take that into consideration. We already talked about the overall impacts to the agency, expanding the cap and implementing this pricing change, and so we can go ahead and move on. So in terms of the buyout option, this is the really the third recommendation for you all to consider this evening. I mentioned that MCE, particularly with its photovoltaic solar power purchase agreements, is now regularly including buyout options. And this is, there's nothing mandatory about this. This is kind of a mutually negotiated option where MCE may, at a certain point in the future, buy the project from the developer for a certain price. And so what we're recommending now is that we include similar language to what already exists in our other PPAs within our feed-in tariff PPA, so that we might have an opportunity, if we so choose, and if we can mutually agree with the project owner, to potentially buy these projects. It creates no obligation whatsoever. It's just an option. And I think this, is a situation where we may or may not choose to move forward with these buyout options, but it's there nonetheless for us to consider if there is a project that's of particular interest. So I think that's really all there is to say about that. And go on to the next one. Yeah, just to summarize, I think the recommendations that are before you tonight are increasing the participatory cap of our feed-in tariff program from 10 megawatts to 15 megawatts, adjusting the price schedule to accommodate the expanded participatory cap, as well as some competitive adjustments that are necessary to make sure that we're the preferred option for local renewable project developers, and then also the inclusion of some standardized language within our feed-in tariff power purchase agreement to create an option for project buyout at some point in the future. So those are the recommendations before you.
Thank you, Kirby. Any questions from the board? Proposed amendments? Yes. Yeah.
Kirby, just a couple of questions. So I guess I'm assuming it wasn't clear in the staff report that we would also expand this to every new jurisdiction within MCE's territory?
Yeah, so the way that the tariff is written, the language is broad and is really intended to be generic, in that the service territory is defined as MCE's entire service territory. So as MCE's service territory grows with time, any communities that join MCE will kind of by default be included as eligible in our feed-in tariff program.
Okay, well, I noticed in the staff report it specifically called out Marin County and City of Richmond, so I wasn't sure if that
Okay.
changed. But on the option for the project buyout, so if that were to be included as a standard kind of option, the way I understand you're speaking about it, it would still be an option. You can include it in there, but there would not be a requirement. If it's included and there isn't a requirement that you will buy out, that you just have these elements to consider if you want to buy it out in the future, right?
That's correct. It just creates the structure if both parties mutually agree to move forward with that buyout option. So it creates no obligation whatsoever.
Okay, great. And then the other question I have is, one of the things, I think before I was on this board, Larry Bregman brought forth the idea of prevailing wage for hiring MCE employees. And I'm wondering if, in order to buy a project, ultimately one of the terms would be that we would want to have certain considerations for those developers, that when they build the project, they would pay prevailing wage, so that it kind of mirrors our principles of what we try to do. I think that would be useful, because I think MCE would want to promote, that not just that we're building the kind of projects we like, but that they're adhering to kind of social principles that we agree on. So I don't know if the rest of the board is amenable to that idea, but I would propose that sort of language. And just before you answer that, I noticed in the staff report, the technical committee will further discuss these options and then potentially bring it back to the board. So
We already
we'd see-
have.
Yeah.
You already did,
Yeah, we
okay.
saw it already.
Yeah,
All right.
if you'd like to make any comments other than one you just made.
No, we
feel free.
did, it came to the technical committee
Okay.
first, and we got a very similar presentation from Kirby and had a good conversation about it.
Yeah.
And approved, we support the
Okay.
proposals, so, yeah, as brought to the board.
So would something like for consideration of a buyout, that when they built the project, they paid prevailing wage?
So, Dawn, do you want to talk a little bit about how our wage policy applies? Maybe
Sure.
that'll help provide some context.
Yeah, we do have a policy that was, former Director Brockman did play a big role in bringing that policy forward and bringing it through to fruition here. And that's still in effect. But as far as incorporating any labor-related provisions in the feed-in tariff, that was discussed at the technical committee, but we didn't reach any firm determination about what we would want to include. So that was deferred to a later date. It's certainly something we could bring back to the technical committee if folks are interested in incorporating that into the guidelines going forward. But we kind of wanted to start with these initial changes first, increasing the cap, putting in the buyout option, and kind of take it from there. But that's something we could certainly look at a future date.
Yeah, and one of the concepts that was discussed, very briefly with the technical committee was the idea of potentially offering price differentials if certain labor requirements were met. And so that's something that I believe Rafi reached out and collected a bit of information, but it wasn't definitive enough at this point in time to really move forward with a specific proposal. So I think the idea is between now and the next review to continue gathering that information and come back with a more definitive proposal so that we could potentially incorporate something like that in the future revision.
Okay, and then one more question.
Sure.
I'll stop.
No.
So, in the event where somebody built on a brownfield or something of that nature, and I created the brownfields programs in the state, so I know a little bit about this. In the event that MCE wanted to exercise the buyout option, is there some sort of liability, indemnifications that would go with that so that you don't eventually get stuck with a property that might have environmental liability, that someday some state agency comes marching in and tells you, oh, by the way, you have to do further cleanup. So I'm just wondering if that's part of, I would definitely suggest that the technical committee really look at that, because even though they all seem great and you're not getting into contamination, you would really want to make sure that, someday in the future, you don't get asked to start joining in the cleanup. That it would be beyond, the kind of resources that you want to really get involved in. So I would just suggest strongly to have some kind of indemnification in there.
Okay, and I am aware that all of our PPAs have indemnification language, and I can honestly tell you, standing here tonight, that I don't recall how that indemnification language extends to the buyout provision. So we can certainly look into that.
Right, and I don't think there'd be. This was the buyout provision was something that we did discuss quite a bit at the technical committee, and I certainly don't think if we did analyze an opportunity and try to decide whether we actually wanted to purchase the property, it wouldn't be an automatic decision. We would want to look at all of these issues and make sure that we weren't taking on liability that was inappropriate. So I don't have a reason to believe that we would somehow change our very careful practices because it's a feed-in tariff project. And don't tell me I'm wrong.
I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. Yeah, I think I think it's reasonable to assume that there will only be select cases where we want to critically evaluate these ownership opportunities. And as you pointed out, I think in those instances, we would certainly go through the same due diligence that we go through on all projects.
Right, we were very cautious about that in our conversation. Craig, did you have a question?
I have a follow-on question, and this might be for you, Barbara. If I heard you correctly, you potentially are suggesting that if they want the buyout option language included in their agreement, that they potentially need to agree to a prevailing wage type of funding. Is that what I'm hearing you ask for?
That was one of the things I did ask for, but it sounds like the technical committee discussed that and they don't want to include that at this time. But I think Kirby also said that one of the things that could be considered in the future is that you might buy one at a higher price if they did include that.
Yeah,
But
I
you don't want
think-
to have that as a standard term right now, is that right?
Yeah, so I think the idea is that, and as I mentioned, there was some research done at the staff level trying to identify what the cost differences would be of developing a project with the use of labor. And it was really kind of not definitive at this point in time what the appropriate adder would be to our, above and beyond what we currently have in our price schedule. So I think we wanted to take some time between now and our next review to figure out how it is that we might want to incorporate that, if at all, in our pricing scheme. And then, with that knowledge, to the extent that a developer was awarded this incentive, then we would of course know that that project met certain criteria and would be able to take that into consideration when any buyout option did come up.
Is there any possibility of doing something like having your standard provisions and then saying something like, these are considerations including but not limited to? So let's say 5 years down the road, you've already signed one with the standard provisions and you decide you want to buy it, that you would have the option of introducing other considerations.
Actually, I'm going to jump in for just a sec, because I think that the discussions that we had about prevailing wage were more tied to the rate that we would pay for the power. We weren't really coupling that with a buyout option per se. I don't think that there would be an advantage to layering that in when we're having buyout discussions. So, but what we did talk about is that maybe we should allow some type of incentive in our PPA rate that encourages prevailing wage. And so that's something that we need more information on. What we were attempting to collect was information from developers about what type of adder would be meaningful to ensure that prevailing wages were used. We were not provided with enough definitive information to come to a conclusion on that.
Thank you. At full participation, the 15 megawatts would represent what percentage of our purchased power?
Yeah, it's actually quite small, and if we can go up, maybe keep going, please. One more, two more. Okay, one down. Okay, right. It's in here somewhere. Maybe just up. Where's the arrow here? Where's the arrow keys? All right. Okay, so here it is, right? Under current fit status, you can see that the San Rafael Airport currently delivers about 0.1%. So we're looking at about 1.5% of our total supply. And that's substantially because of the resource type that we're likely to see participating in our feed-in tariff program, because photovoltaic solar projects, just based on the fact that they only produce electric energy during daylight hours, it's about a 25%, what they call capacity factor. So it's, if it was a biomass facility, it'd be a lot more.
Right, but if I understand what you're saying, this 1 megawatt project represents 1/10 of 1%, so at full participation it would be 1.5.
1.5, that's correct.
And what percentage of our expenditures would it represent, since you mentioned that there's $1 million increase in cost by changing that last 0.5%, going from 1% to 1.5% is going to cost us $1 million. What percent of our expenditures would this 1.5% be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually haven't done that math, but it would probably be, you could say it would be something under double the 1.5%, probably call it 2.5%, something in that range. Okay. So it would be disproportionately higher because of the incentives.
Right, that's the whole point of the program. Right?
Exactly, but not so much where it's it's jumping off the page and interrupting progress elsewhere.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions, Ford?
As to the buyout option, the purpose of that is, I understood it sitting on the technical committee, is so that there's a choice, and it doesn't make any sense to interject a bunch of, to front load conditions into the exercise of a choice. All of the policies that we have as an organization will be brought to bear on that possibility as we consider it. So there really isn't any point to overload it at this juncture.
Good point. Other questions from the board? Comments, questions from the public? Sam, come on up.
Hi, Kirby. Can I share this Bloomberg report? It just came out 2 hours ago. So maybe
Sure, I certainly haven't read it.
Yeah, it just came out from the conference in New York right now on the solar market that you were mentioning, the feed-in tariffs. In the report, it mentions, look who's buying all the solar arrays right now. Coal industry, nuclear industry, utilities. That's that 100 billion I mentioned. So with this bio thing, it's really important that you have first option to buy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Anyone else from the public would like to comment on the feed-in tariff program? No, seeing none. Okay. So, unless there's further discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the suggested revisions to our feed-in tariff program.
So moved.
Yes. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposition? That's approved. Thank you, Kirby. Alrighty. Kirby, you have to stay right there because now we're going to talk about greenhouse gas emissions analysis.
Okay, fantastic. So no presentation on this item. I will direct you, however, to the staff report that's been prepared for this item. And for those of you that have been on the board for more than a year, you're familiar with this process. For those of you that are newer, I'll go ahead and just give you a little bit of background. Obviously, MCE, one of their kind of fundamental goals and objectives is focused on reducing GHG emissions, particularly GHG emissions related to the electric power sector. And so one of the key metrics that exists in that space to measure progress and also compare one entity to another is the development of a portfolio emissions factor, which essentially represents the emissions intensity associated with the various power sources that are included within a utility's resource mix. And so the staff report that you have in front of you tonight walks through how it is that we conduct that process every year, what information is taken into consideration, and also some information regarding discussions that are ongoing in the industry and really a bubbling up of interest in this particular issue. It's certainly very important to MCE, it's very important to PG&E, and it's very important to various other stakeholders in making sure that there's kind of a level playing field in how it is that this information is calculated and presented. So, again, every year we go through this exercise, and unfortunately, due to the availability of information within the electric utility industry often occurring on a highly lagged basis, we're just now providing you with an overview of our calendar year 2013 emissions factor and how it compares to the similar factor that's been calculated by PG&E. And the reason for that is because the process that PG&E goes through typically results in their publication of that statistic about 12 to 14 or 15 months after the operating year to which that statistic relates. So, for example, just in late January of 2015, PG&E published its emissions factor for the 2013 calendar year, and so here we are providing this comparison tonight. And I think going forward, as the staff report indicates, we can certainly provide you with that information on a kind of more current basis. So we're in the process right now at the staff level of going through and updating our 2014 calendar year procurement statistics, and we'll be able to provide an emission statistic related to 2014 operations in the not too distant future. But for our purposes here tonight, we're really focused on the 2013 calendar year and how it is that MCE's portfolio emission factor stacks up with PG&E's. And so, again, this is an important statistic that really takes into consideration the various fuel sources that are represented within a utility's supply portfolio. And generally speaking, what happens when calculating an emission factor is that any resource that emits pollutants during the generation of electric power tends to increase your emission factor. Any resource that does not emit pollutants, resources like various renewable energy sources, hydroelectric power, and then also in the case of PG&E nuclear generation, those resources tend to reduce your overall emission factor. And when you look at all of the different contributions of the mix of fuel sources within a utility supply portfolio and associate the emission intensity of each one of those fuel sources and the proportion that it's represented within that supply portfolio, you derive this emission factor. And unfortunately, there's no standard that's been handed down by any competent regulatory authority at this point in time to which MCE or any other entity within the state of California that they must adhere to. So what we do have now is we have an emissions reporting regime that's administered by the California Air Resources Board, and MCE conforms with its reporting obligations under that program, as does PG&E and various other entities throughout the state that fall under that umbrella. But that program doesn't hand down how it is that these emission statistics should be calculated and communicated to customers of utilities. And so what MCE is really endeavoring to do here when it creates this statistic is generate an alignment between the information that customers see in the power content label that arrives each year. And if you're familiar with that label, it lays out by fuel source all of the different components of your resource mix in terms of electric power. And it's designed to take that power content label and translate it into how it is that emissions are derived through the delivery of those different power sources. And so there are a number of tables here in the staff report, and I believe it's on page 4 of the staff report. At the top of the page, there is a very basic table, 3 columns. The leftmost column very generally describes the power sources that are included within MCE's supply portfolio. You can see there that the top line is total renewable energy, and that's comprised, or was comprised in 2013, of renewable portfolio standard eligible renewable energy. So this is renewable energy that's generated by power producers that have gone through the California Energy Commission certification process and are allowed to generate products that can be used to demonstrate regulatory compliance under the RPS program. And then we also have non-RPS eligible renewable energy sources. These use the exact same fuel sources as the RPS eligible generators, but have, for any number of reasons, not chosen to go through the CEC certification process, but oftentimes meet other standards that can be even more stringent than the CEC's certification. So green energy, for example. In our case, all of these non-RPS eligible renewable energy sources that are represented here are green energy eligible. And what that means is they not only use a fuel source that is similar to what's eligible under California's RPS program, but the deliveries are also produced by generators that are 15 years old or newer. So we're using generators that are often more recently developed than resources that can be used under California's RPS program. So that's that top section, and then we have zero carbon resources, and that is simply power that's produced by hydroelectric generators that are not eligible to participate under California's RPS program due to their size. So in order to qualify as an eligible renewable source, hydroelectric generators must be 30 megawatts or smaller. So what we're talking about here in this zero carbon line item from MCE's perspective are larger than 30 megawatt hydroelectric facilities. And then the last item here above the total is system power or unspecified purchases. And this is kind of a hot topic for conversation. These are basically purchases that are made from California's bulk electric system. They're not associated with a particular generator. This is very common in the electric utility industry. It's not like we're skirting any rules here. Everybody does this. And oftentimes it's the most cost-effective approach to go out and buy your residual energy requirements, particularly when you offer the seller flexibility to source that power from multiple generators. And so that's basically what we're doing here. Over time, you'll notice as our 2014 power statistics come out and then moving forward into 2015 and beyond, we expect that number to continue going down, which I think is a good thing for this agency. But anyway, you can see the volumes that are associated with those broad-based categories, as well as the percentage of those particular fuel sources that contribute to MCE's overall resource mix. And then what we do when we derive MCE's GHG emission factor is we consider the emissions intensity associated with each one of those fuel source categories. And in the case of RPS eligible renewable energy, those are all zero emissions energy sources, sources like solar and wind that produce no emissions, or biomass and biogas, which actually go through the process of converting methane into electric power and essentially do the environment a favor through that conversion, as methane is more damaging to the environment than CO2 in this particular case. And so those considerations are all taken into account when dealing with the renewable energy sources. Of course, hydroelectric has zero emissions associated with it. We, in turn, count that as zero emissions as well. And then with system power, you'll notice here in that 4th page of the staff report a bit of a discussion about the use of the California Air Resources Board, their default emission rate for unspecified sources. And so this is a publicly available metric that MCE has been advised to use by CARB for purposes of calculating its portfolio emission factor. And this is published by CARB in their mandatory reporting requirements for GHG emissions. We check every year to make sure that there are no changes to that number, and if there are, incorporate them in this calculation. And you can see in the second table on page 4 how it is that we walk through the process of determining MCE's GHG emission factor by attributing the appropriate emission intensity for each one of these broadly defined fuel categories, and build that up into a total emissions quantity that's generated by MCE's power purchases. And then, of course, through by dividing that number by the overall power supply, we arrive at an overall emission factor of 364 pounds per megawatt hour, which is roughly 17% lower than PG&E's reported emission factor for the 2013 calendar year. And I think that's about all there is to say about that. There are 2 other attachments to the staff report. One is a more detailed discussion of the methodology that's employed by MCE in calculating its GHG emissions. And I think that's very important, not only for you to consider, but to make available to the public, so that when they have questions about how it is that we're completing this exercise, they're well informed and all the cards are on the table, so to speak, as to how we complete this exercise. And you can see on the first page of that Understanding MCE's GHG emission factor document that we do independently calculate emission factors for both the light green and deep green products, and that the aggregate is also calculated for MCE's total supply portfolio. And moving forward, as we launch the local solar program, of course, we'll present that information as well. And as you'd reasonably expect, that will be zero emissions, much like our deep green program. So if you are a light green customer, the emission factor that is attributed to your supply portfolio is 371 pounds of CO2 equivalent per megawatt hour. And that also compares very favorably to PG&E's emission factor. So I guess before I wrap things up, I'd simply add that there's been a lot of interest and momentum surrounding the discussion of GHG emission factors. The PUC has been trying to orchestrate a workshop on this subject, and rest assured MCE will be participating in that workshop. I think it really would be of interest for MCE and other entities to work toward the development of a singular methodology for GHG emission factor calculations, just to avoid some of the confusion and consternation that's existed around this subject matter. And I think the good news is there will be work performed towards that goal. I don't know how long it's going to take. I think there's going to be quite a lot of stakeholders involved in that process, and I think there's going to be robust discussion surrounding the issue. But I do look forward to participating in that and working towards that that singular methodology, because I think that really would be helpful just to avoid some of this confusion. But anyway, those are the documents that have been prepared, and I think the recommendation that's before you tonight is to approve the release and posting of this information for use by MCE customers and also members of the public. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Kirby.
Yeah.
Greg, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question on that last handout you were talking about, where it talks about light green being 371 pounds and dark green. What percentage is 100%, or what percentage is deep green?
It's zero. It has
No, what percentage of our customers are deep green?
Oh yeah, it's, I think Jamie's about
It's a little over 3%.
a little over 3%,
Yeah, because I calculated this would be about 2. So
Yeah, and that, again, so that's current, and it's been growing over time. So
Okay.
in 2013, I believe that's about it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Denise?
Yeah, that was just basically my question, is that we're always like a year and a half back with statistics.
Right.
And because we have been experiencing such growth, you know, I would think that the numbers today are way different than what we're looking at here. So it looks like a tremendous amount of work that goes into these calculations, but when does 2014, when do we see those numbers all of a sudden?
Yeah, so
Exactly.
yeah, no, we're actually, MCE is working on the preparation of 2014 procurement statistics, emission statistics. Matter of fact, we just had a discussion over lunch with most of MCE staff today regarding that very topic, and we're working on that now. Again, the data-intensive nature of the electric utility industry and some of the lags associated with collecting that information don't allow for real-time prep of these statistics. So we're almost done collecting all the information we need for 2014. Some of it is still trickling in, just the last little bits, and so we should be able to have that information pulled together, I'd say, within the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Barbara?
Just now that we're moving into natural gas, in the future, when you include natural gas in the emission factor, since it's not renewable, where will it go?
Oh, it'll have its own line item, as a
Okay.
matter of fact. So what you'll see, if you go back and look at that table where we have a pretty simplistic composition in terms of our supply portfolio as it's presented in this table. But what you'll see as we move forward and integrate those natural gas purchases into our supply portfolio is a separate line item representing the volume and then also the proportion of our total supply. And then, of course, the emission factor. And I think as we discussed, it's actually considerably lower than the emission factor that we'd otherwise attribute to these unspecified sources.
Okay, and then just one more question. So on natural gas, let me just ask this question regarding RECs, as everybody always has concerns about that. Do we have an estimate of what percentage of the power supply in light green and deep green is coming from RECs? Just because that's continually asked, and I understand we all do it, it's what we should be doing, but I just would like to hear more about what the percentage is.
Yes, so just as a clarifying comment. So when I believe that when you're referring to RECs, you're referring to unbundled renewable energy certificates, so RECs that are purchased separate from the underlying electric power. And yeah, absolutely, those statistics will be calculated, are being calculated right now, and we'll have that information for you. And I think the good news is that Jamie and her team in particular are keenly aware of the sensitivities surrounding that issue. I think that fundamentally these are very important products that are available within the electric utility industry, but there are some concerns about them, and I think it's been the focus of MCE's procurement efforts to try to wean the supply portfolio away from unbundled renewable energy certificates to the greatest extent practical. But I think we'll have that information for you, and hopefully that'll answer your question.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board? Comments from the public on this item? So Kirby, I really have to applaud you. You know, you do such incredibly careful and sophisticated work in coming up with this greenhouse gas emissions statistics for us, and it's such a acutely important piece of information. As you noted at the end of your remarks, it's so frustrating that there isn't a single metric that everyone can use. But in the meantime, I just really want to applaud the work that you're doing to make sure that the analysis that we come out with is as accurate as possible and as accurately tied to the kind of power that we're purchasing. So one day maybe that will be a better, truly even playing field out there. But in the meantime, great work and good transparency for us and our customers. Yeah, super. All right. So would somebody like to make a motion? And what you need is our approval to use and distribute and post on the web this greenhouse gas emission analysis for calendar year 2013. A motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? That's approved. Thank you, Kirby. I think you get to sit down now. All right, so now we're on to item 9 on our agenda, which is the second amendment to the lease agreement with 700 Fifth Avenue LLC. I hate to thank you. It's not about the conference room table.
No, and this is, I'm sorry to do this to you because I have to let you know that the communications update this evening is going to be amazing. And so this item is the only thing that's standing between you and the communications item, which is going to be really inspiring. But yeah, I will begin by giving a quick overview of this item, and then I can take any questions that folks might have. Just as a refresher and a reminder, your board approved a lease agreement on September 4th, 2014 with 700 Fifth Avenue LLC. I know that name is now confusing because the address of our building is no longer 700 Fifth Avenue, but that is the name of the LLC, so that's what's going to be on the lease going forward. Your board approved this lease in September. It's a 10-year lease for the building that we are now housed in. The size of that building, just as a reminder of some of the basics, it's a 10,000 square foot building, commercial space. It's in downtown San Rafael. It's about 5 blocks north of here, very close to the transit hub in San Rafael. And there were several improvements that were included in the original lease agreement, some of which have been completed by now, and some of which are still in the process of being completed or still a few months off from being completed. And those include some structural building upgrades for code and safety compliance, expanding the boardroom to accommodate our board meetings. That has been completed. It looks really good. New carpet, paint, and cabinets, new fire sprinkler system, which is now active and looks really great and is almost completed the full permitting process. And the last item noted in the staff report here is compliance with ADA accessibility throughout the building. And we have ADA compliance in all parts of the building. Once the elevator is installed, we'll be completely there. But at this point, we have ADA compliance with door widths and restrooms and that sort of thing. And the completion of the elevator will be the final step in full ADA compliance. The elevator has not begun construction yet, and it's looking like that may be delayed beyond the time frame set forth in the lease agreement. So that's something we'll be watching very carefully. But most of the improvements in the interior building have been substantially completed. There's still a lot of finishing touches that are being finalized, and we hope that those will be completed expeditiously, but there has been a lot of progress just in the last week since this staff report went out to you all, and so we're feeling optimistic that we're really close to the final state on the interior improvements. I want to note that the leaseor was able to accommodate some of our interim work needs during the transition. We had really a hard stop here at the biomarine facility and needed to exit the building in early March, and the leaseor of the new building was able to accommodate our needs even while some of the final construction was being wrapped up, and we really appreciated that. Due to that accommodation, we think it's reasonable to waive the proposed liquidated damages for late occupancy, because we actually were able to move in at the time we needed to, and we ended up not having to pay any damages for being late here in BioMarin. So it feels like a fair accommodation to make, and has been requested by the leaseor. So that's what we're recommending to you this evening. However, I want to note, because I know it's important to many of you, that the liquidated damages will not be waived at this time for any delay in completing the elevator or any other non-occupancy related improvements. So that has been clarified in the lease agreement that you have before you this evening. I wanted to let you all know that because the landlord has was not as prompt as we would have liked in providing feedback on the lease agreement, there were some last minute changes that were proposed after the item went out in the board packet, and so I just want to highlight what those are. I don't think that they raise any big concerns, and they aren't really substantive, but I just want to run through them really quick. So in the attachment that's called the Second Amendment to Lease, if we drop down to item 3, there was some language deleted in the most recent draft that did not clarify. Well, we actually had a few changes in this paragraph, but in the most recent draft that was sent across this afternoon, it did not include a clarification that elevator damages would not be subjected to the waiver. So we've requested that that language go back in, and that would be part of my recommendation to you all this evening. The language regarding the elevator is included in the board packet draft. So my request to the leaseor will be that we retain that language. And then there was some additional non-substantive language added in paragraph 4, the consent for leasee to have pet dogs on the premises. There was just some clarifications there about the leaseor being able to first approve our written rules and regulations covering the presence of dogs on the
That's
premises.
fantastic, John, so now I
Very
can bring my
reasonable.
dog to the board
I knew
meetings.
you would like
Thank you
that,
so
yes.
much.
I know, we will have some limitations, but you will probably fit into those limitations. And that is, yeah, that's it. Those were the proposed changes. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board? Yeah, great.
With regards to elevators, sometimes they're outside of the contractor's control because it takes a long time to get the state inspectors to come by. So is that taken into consideration on that liquidated damages that pertain?
Yes, it is taken into consideration, and we'll be tracking that very closely. Because there can often be a lot of back and forth with permitting agencies and some finger pointing maybe, we tend to be very engaged in that process so that we can track where the responsibility lies. I think at this point, based on, we've been involved in the weekly construction meetings, so we're very up to speed on what potential delays there may be. At this point, the potential delays are tied to maybe a lack of early bids being put out, and maybe a lack of in-depth analysis of the bids that came back in. I think at this time, the leaseor is looking to select a different model for an elevator, which would create some additional delays in timing. So the permit issues have not come into place yet with the elevator. The delays that we anticipate at this point are due to elevator fabrication and selection of a sub-vendor.
When will the elevator, what's the time for the elevator, what's the schedule?
Well, I can tell you what the lease says. The lease says that the elevator must be complete within 90 days of occupancy date.
Okay.
And one of the, the key purpose of this Second Amendment is to codify the occupancy date as April 1st. And so that gives the leaseor until July 1 to have the elevator operational. At that point in time, the liquidated damages would be $4,000 per month for any delay after that time, prorated per day for the time of the month when it is workable.
Any other questions from the board? Any comment from the public on the lease agreement amendment that's proposed? Okay, seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve. I have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It's approved. All right. And now, finally, we've gotten to the communications update.
Lovely. Good evening, everyone. Actually, can you go back one slide? Thanks. So a couple of months ago, I presented to you community outreach plans for unincorporated Napa County, Benicia, El Cerrito, and San Pablo. And those were meant to be our roadmaps for the outreach in these new communities since we are offering service to them this year. With the addition of all of those communities, we're expanding our customer base by roughly about 30%. And over the last few months, the public affairs team has been very busy, as you might imagine, implementing the community outreach plans. Today, the Napa enrollment is complete. All of the customers in unincorporated Napa County were enrolled in February. So all of the enrollment notices have been sent out to all of the customers. And the enrollments for Benicia, San Pablo, and El Cerrito are scheduled to happen next month in May. So far, we've sent out 3 notices to all of the members, all of the account holders in each of those communities. One point I would say about notices is that we create unique notices for each of the communities based on the feedback that we get from the community leader advisory groups, who are residents within those communities who review our outreach plans and give us feedback on our messaging about what makes sense to them, what they need to know, and also providing unique messaging for certain customers. We've talked about this before, customers who have solar on their roofs or customers who have low income rates, for example. So we did a little tally of how many unique notices we've sent out so far, and there have been 56 unique enrollment notices that have been mailed out, which is pretty great. We've also contacted 475 different community organizations and businesses throughout those service areas. So you might remember in those community outreach plans, there were lists of organizations that we were planning to reach out to. In addition to sending them notices, of course, we were sending emails and making phone calls and asking to do presentations. Next slide. So you should have seen at your desks a list of community events for 2015. It's pretty lengthy already. This is the lovely public affairs team, and they're the ones we've been speaking of, who have been so busy. It's Ashley, Justin, Ben, Alex, Allison, and Alan. And to date, we've already participated in 81 public events and meetings in those communities, which is really impressive. If you look at since January, sorry, I should clarify, since January alone, there have been 81 events. And if you spread that out over the business days this year, that's 100% of the business days and then some that we're attending community events and meetings. We have an additional 29 more on the calendar through mid-June that you can look through on this sheet, and that's 110 events total that we have scheduled. And I definitely think there are more coming because although we've been making those phone calls and emails, sometimes it takes a little bit before people get back to us. Next slide. So I want to give you an update on where we're at with each of the communities. As I said, Napa County has already been enrolled. These are a couple of the ads that we had running in Napa. You may remember the We Have the Power theme in all of our ads. These are residents in Napa County. So we have Michael Honig and his daughters from Honig Vineyard and Winery. They were one of the first commercial customers in Napa to go deep green. We have Kathy Stewart, who is a resident in Napa, and also Javier Solario with the Napa Valley Farm Worker Foundation. Next slide. So in unincorporated Napa County, there are about 15,700 eligible accounts, and there have been 9 events that we've participated this year in Napa County. We started our outreach in Napa in November, since they were enrolled earlier than the other communities, and we did about 10 other events in 2014, so that's just a piece of the events that we've participated in. We also formed some really great relationships with Sustainable Napa County and Napa Valley Vintners and Visit Napa Valley, and those 3 organizations distributed newsletters to all of their constituents about MCE, so it was a really great opportunity to share more information. Next slide. This slide shows the choices that people in Napa County made. So to date, there have been 172 deep green enrollments. That's about 1% of the eligible accounts in Napa. And the participation rate generally is really high. We've got a 90% participation rate in light green. and 9% opt-out rate. And yeah, in unincorporated Napa County. So when customers request to opt out, whether they do it on the phone or they do it on our website, we always ask them if they would be willing to provide a reason. And so we've broken out here the reasons that customers have opted out when they give us a reason. You'll see across all of the communities that the top 2 reasons in this order are concerns or disliking the automatic enrollment and also concerns about rates. The other 3 reasons for opting out are government concerns with the government-run agency, billing concerns, and reliability concerns. The 3 of those vary a little bit depending on community, and I'll show you that with the others. Next slide. These are some of the sample ads that were in Benicia. So the image on the right is of Tim and Lynn Hoyle, who are Benicia residents. And the image on the left is a full-page ad that we took out in the Benicia Herald. Benicia had some misinformation circulated in that community, and there were a lot more questions in that community about our renewable energy supply compared to PG&E, how we operate and how we're governed. And so we changed our tactic a little bit in Benicia to be a lot more information-based with some of our ads. So we published this article responding to the top questions that we were receiving in Benicia, and having some graphical depictions to help answer some of those questions as well. Next slide. So for the city of Benicia, there are just under 13,000 eligible accounts so far. We have 33 events on the schedule for Benicia, and there have been community newsletters circulated by 6 different organizations. In addition to our advertising campaign, on-the-ground outreach, and our enrollment notices, we also included an insert about marine clean energy in the water bill. That goes to customers in Benicia. And it's kind of hard to see this picture right there, but that's Allison, who is our team lead for Benicia at our first MCE hosted Benicia community meeting. And those are going really great, by the way. We're doing a different sort of setup where at the end, instead of asking people to raise hands and ask questions, our whole team goes to the events, and we have tables and 1 staff member at each table. And people go to those tables, and it really invites a lot of participation, a lot more questions than what we normally see at those types of events. Next slide. So this is the breakdown for Benicia. Again, those customers aren't going to be enrolled until May. We have had 115 deep green enrollments. There's also a high participation rate. 85% of Benicia customers are, as of now, planning on being on light green because they've not yet opted out. There is a 14% opt-out rate in the city of Benicia. It's a little bit higher than what I just reported in Napa, but when we look back at the numbers that we saw in the city of Richmond enrollment, they're pretty much on par. At the city of Richmond, they were at about 12 to 13% at this same point during the enrollment. Next slide. Moving on to El Cerrito. This is the Durr family on the left, and on the right we have Elevation 66 Brewing Co. Next slide. So in El Cerrito, we have just under 11,500 eligible accounts. We've got 18 events on the calendar, and we've sent community newsletters. East Bay Sanitary and the city of El Cerrito have sent community newsletters, and as you can see,
the guy on the right.
The customers in El Cerrito are eating us up, and luckily, we print our enrollment notices on recycled paper with soy-based ink, so no child was harmed here. Someone posted that on their Facebook and tagged us. It was pretty adorable. Next slide. So this is the breakdown of what's happening in El Cerrito. Right now, El Cerrito is taking the lead on deep green enrollments. They have 340 deep green enrollments already.
Nice.
And yeah, that represents 3% of the customer base in El Cerrito. We're pretty jazzed about it. And the opt-out rate is also pretty low. It's at 7%. One thing that that you'll notice is different in the El Cerrito reasons for opting out compared to Napa County and Benicia is that the government agency issue dropped down 1. So in Napa County and in Benicia, it was the 3rd most commonly cited reason. In El Cerrito, that's not the case. Next slide. These are ads from the city of San Pablo. We have Master T on the left, Iracema Carmago on the right and her family, and then Lucas Davis at Chris's Kitchen cooking. He's been a chef there for 30 years. It was really fun to do all these photo shoots and also a good opportunity for us to make new relationships in the community. Next slide. There are just over 10,000 eligible accounts in San Pablo. We've got 21 events on the calendar, and I'm sorry, that should say 3 community newsletters. They've gone out from the San Pablo Economic Development Corporation, the City of San Pablo, and the El Sobrante Chamber of Commerce. Next slide. So to date, there have been 172 deep green enrollments in the City of San Pablo. That's 1%. And the opt-out rate is also pretty low. We're seeing that across the board. It's at 9%. The reasons for opting out are the same as what we saw in El Cerrito. So any questions about enrollment before I move on to the next topic? No. All right, next slide.
One question.
Sure.
Explain again, what's the government agency opt-out?
So when people request to opt out, we say, would you mind telling us why? And one of the reasons that people say they opt out is because they have concerns with a government-run electricity agency. All right, next slide. So the next thing I want to talk about just a little bit is what's going on with Deep Green within our existing service area. Next slide. We have community campaigns that have been implemented by grassroots organizations, which is really amazing. So first, I'd like to give a big thank you to Main Street Moms. They implemented an extensive campaign this year. They wrote 2 articles in the West Marin Citizen and Point Reyes Light. They paid for ads to go into those newspapers about Deep Green. They printed and created their own flyers. And they tabled at the post office in West Marin several days. And they also did a radio interview on the West Marin radio station. And as a result, we saw just over 14% increase in Deep Green enrollments in West Marin. So that was a really effective campaign. And we feel really fortunate to have the moms on our side. Next slide. Thank you to Fairfax Action Committee. Last week, I believe it was last week, they just initiated a Deep Green campaign. I'm sorry, not last week, April 4th. That was a couple of weeks ago. And you'll see below there's pictures of the Good Earth because they kicked off their campaign with tabling at the Good Earth and being out front there to tell people about Deep Green. So also thank you to Good Earth for letting them do that.
Thanks for Allison coming out.
Yeah.
We actually initiated it earlier and the chamber is involved, so.
Oh, okay.
One of your staff, I think it was Ben, came to the chamber.
Oh, right.
We're
Yeah.
trying to push for the commercial businesses to get more involved in Deep Green.
Right.
And we'll be doing some tabling at the farmer's market. I'm on the climate action committee too, so I was there too. So we're going to continue that and probably, we love Allison, so we'd love to.
I bet she did my goal too.
She was very fun.
Good, thank you so much, I really appreciate it. And we'll be reporting out on the increase in Deep Green enrollments once the campaign is a little further along. And then lastly, thank you to the San Anselmo Quality of Life Commission. They are also doing a Deep Green campaign, and so far this year we've seen an increase of just over 5% in San Anselmo for Deep Green. And these are little snapshots of the flyers that they're handing out to people to try and encourage them to go Deep Green. The San Anselmo Quality of Life Commission is really focusing on businesses. So on the right, you can see they actually took quotes from some local businesses, Doodlebug and Marin Power Yoga, about how much they love Deep Green. Any questions about the Deep Green? No? Okay, next slide. So this is exciting news. You guys probably know that we have had 2 websites for a really long time. The MCEcleanenergy.org, which looks like this, and then the marincleanenergy.org, which housed all of your board materials. Those sites are officially merged. So if you enter in marincleanenergy.org, it will take you to this website. So don't be confused by that, it's intentional. And we'll be sending out an email to you. Darlene will likely be sending out an email to you with the links on where you can find the meeting agendas, the meeting calendar schedule, and the key documents. But those sort of arrows show there's a new menu for meetings, and then under the About Us, there's a new item for key documents. So it just simplifies the process. And if you guys have any questions about the new site or suggestions for how things are organized, please send them my way and Darlene's way, and we're happy to make adjustments. Next slide. So we talked about Earth Day just a little bit earlier, and this is a sample of the ad that we will be publishing in our local newspapers next week on April 22nd. It's really a call to action to try and get people to do something for Earth Day, and we hope that something is signing up for Deep Green. That's all for my presentation. Any other questions?
Fantastic. Yeah, really fabulous. Amazing amount of work. And you're still standing? Yeah.
Most of my team, I was like, oh, there's 2 meetings tonight, but the rest of them didn't have to do anything today.
Yeah. Any questions, comments on this fabulous work? Okay, public? Yeah. All right. So our last item was board member and staff matters, and I wanted to welcome Jose Perez.
Yes.
Yeah, I might have beat you to it.
That was on my list.
Beat you to it. Well, you can say more. You can say more about him. I wanted to make you welcome, Jose.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you. Don,
Yeah.
you wanna talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, that was my item as well. I just want to welcome Jose Perez to our team. He's been with us now since Monday, and is serving as an administrative assistant for our internal operations team. So he'll be helping out with board meetings, obviously, and with a lot of other things that are needed around the new office. And we're just so grateful to have him. So welcome, Jose.
Fabulous. Yeah,
Great.
awesome. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right. Anything else? Any other matters? No? Everybody want to adjourn? Yes. All right. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.